Hi everyone, Bullberry Show is back for its third episode, but now with a twist. Firstly, apologies for the delay. I've had just a bit of real-life stuff, so I had to postpone this video a bit. Secondly, I have received quite some feedback on the scoring system, and I tend to agree that there was almost no possibility to get lower than by a certain amount. Therefore, I've revamped the scoring system so that technical categories bring less to the table and gameplay ones bring much more. However, at the same time, I will not be able to put the scores on the screen following each grade, so I will just make a table at the end of the video with the final scoring. While the review part is going to be a bit more chaotic, but I'll try to keep consistency. Also, for consistency, in the very end of the video, I will grade Dota 2 and New World once again, so we'll see how they change. Other than that, let's get to the video itself. Today we have Overwatch 2 on our table, and before we start, I have to admit that technically I am not a noob in this game. I've been playing the original Overwatch for some hundreds of hours, only Zen was sitting at like 80, if I remember correctly, so probably this is a less noobish review than the previous two. I've had like almost all achievements in the game, and missed only Zen and Doomfist, if I remember correctly again. However, my aim still sucks, and I start a new account, so everything seems to be fair and square. Saying that, let's roll! Overwatch 2 was released in October 2022 as a free-to-play sequel to the highly successful original game. It aimed to bring new content, including PvE modes, but quickly came under fire for its monetization model and failure to deliver promised content. The first major difference of Overwatch 2 is that it is on Steam, which is a huge plus. However, my happiness was not for too long, as after you get it on Steam, you have to register a Battle.net account, which was a huge pain in the butt. Not only did it require several captchas, confirmation of an email and whatnot, but it also required a mobile phone, which is a bit insane. I don't recall anything like that needed for other Blizzard games, at least the old ones. Overall, installation wasn't too hard, but more, let's say, tedious, and I hated it really much. The second major difference was the absence of a box price, so at first glance, it was a bit of a pleasant surprise since the first Overwatch was around $50. However, then you get into the game, and now there are going to be some spoilers, the additional monetization sucks. Within 10 hours of playtime, I could buy 0 skins, literally nothing above some common or rare items, maybe 1 or 2. In the first game, I would have received quite a few levels and quite a few loot boxes for those levels, but in the second, I received almost nothing. And this is in a game where each hero has more than 100 collectibles. However, be not afraid, as you can get your credit card and pay for it all. $40 for a skin? Sure. Some more dollars for the premium part of the season pass, and more, and more, and more. I have no idea how much the whole collection would be if you start from scratch, as I did, but definitely not less than several $1,000s. And you know what? PvE was the main reasoning to roll out the second game in the first place. And yes, it's there. Much PvE, such wow. And those stupid 3 missions are $15 on top. I wonder if we'll see premium heroes unlocked only with some cash, as already now the new heroes are eligible to those with the premium pass for a couple of weeks. To the extent I do not like loot boxes, the system in the original Overwatch was very friendly to those not wishing to pay for cosmetics. It was random, but at least it was designed in a way that the more you play, the more chances you get. In the sequel, it doesn't really matter how much you play, you just have to spend real money to buy stuff. What's worse, and this popped up from the worst free-to-play games, are different currencies that are scarce but obviously can be purchased with a single swipe of a credit card. But let's get back to the game itself. First, easiness to install. Even though Overwatch 2 is on Steam, I absolutely hated the installation process. I mean, not only do you need a Battle.net account, which by itself is apparently quite tedious to create nowadays, but also you need a real phone number attached to this account, which is a bit over the top. I could understand needing an authenticator, or anything like that, but the way Blizzard tries to fight bots and cheaters is questionable anyway. Finally, we're logged in and start our journey. Basically, the tutorial is fine. It gives you a very basic understanding of what to do, how to move, and some basics of hero abilities and playstyle. Nothing above that, nothing too burdensome. It'll do. It might have been a bit more diverse than Soldier running around, but matches with bots are good enough for you to explore maps and try out different heroes, so no complaints. After the tutorial, we head into Unranked, and well, nothing too much to complain about either. The queues, even at odd times like early mornings on weekdays, were quite good, especially if you're fine with playing a healer or a tank. Since my aim sucks, I didn't mind at all. I've been wished death only once in like 10 hours of playtime, so the community is not that toxic, at least in casual matches. Most likely, if I suck in ranked matches, that would be worse. But again, in my world, until I get yelled at by a random kid, that's not truly toxic. There were leavers, obvious trolls, and much worse players than myself. But again, in casual mode, I could not care less until they don't form a critical mass of the player base. Graphics are secondary, but fine. Like, have a look at those completely different and unique models. One is from the initial game, another one is from the sequel. Now you guess which one is which. The interface is fine too, sleek enough. No need to use any third-party software, which is also kind of bannable, so nothing to say in particular, but nothing to complain about either. And now we're slowly but steadily getting to the game itself. Well, didn't think that I'd say this, but I miss loot boxes. The current progression system doesn't give you anything at all, just tiny bits of currencies here and there. And if you're lucky, you'll get something. For the rest, there is no progression in this session shooter, so you just unlock some heroes, which I'll cover a bit later. Then you unlock ranked mode, and that's basically it. Forget about having anything cosmetic at all, and there is nothing left in the game to offer. Yes, there are some PvE events here and there, and there are some holiday events like the one for Christmas, but they do not give you any progress besides a bunch of achievements. For the balance, it's quite okay-ish, but for me, it might be a bit too fast. I don't miss the 2-3 tank games that were full of shields, but having only one tank and at the same time having shields be quite weak makes games a bit too punishing sometimes. This is especially true if there's a smurf on the other team. My very first match was against Widowmaker, who just deleted our team one by one. If we could switch to a bit more tanky composition, that might have helped, and we would have forced the other team to switch. Actually, during my playtime, I had only one match where both teams swapped heroes and counterpicked each other, and it was amazing. For the rest of the time, even when someone picked Pharaoh against 2 snipers, they didn't switch after going 0-10. Also, speaking about smurfs, I wouldn't call them that in casual games, but there are quite a few players with a significant skill gap. The good thing is that when there's a very skilled opponent, you usually get a veteran on your team, so it balances out, though sometimes the whole match turns into a duel between them. Even then, the difficulty progression wasn't bad. You start with the tutorial, play a lot of casual games, and eventually unlock ranked matches. I didn't experience any major difficulty spikes, which is nice. Finally, gameplay itself. As I already mentioned, Overwatch is still fun to play. The original developers found a very good niche between making it easy to start while still leaving plenty of room for improvement. The maps were enhanced to ensure there are no dead-end chokeholds that can't be taken, given relatively equal skill between the teams. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of the push and pull mechanics with the robots, but it's far from bad. However, what I've noticed is that the vast majority of the matches I've played ended without full progress being achieved. It seems like the new philosophy of the sequel is that you push the payload or progress objectives to a certain extent, then drag the game out until the timer runs down. It's all covered up by the fast-paced gameplay, so you don't pay much attention to it while playing. For content, there are several play modes, but the majority don't give you any substantial rewards in terms of cosmetics, achievements, currency, or anything like that. You can spend some time doing side activities if you're tired of the main mode. The original Overwatch kept me hooked for hundreds of hours, so I would assume the sequel could do the same. Obviously, playing with friends would make this even better, but I stuck to solo play, as this is part of the channel's rules. It wasn't too bad, to be honest. That said, I can only imagine solo queue in ranked play being a nightmare, but that's true for many games. So it's nothing too dramatic. So it sounds not too bad, does it? Well, to an extent. I have to mention the grind wall, but as I said, it's nothing too crazy. Within 20-30 hours, you can unlock all the heroes and play modes. It might seem a bit long, but you'll have less than an hour of playtime with each hero unless you stick to 3 or 4 mains. You'll need to play to unlock stuff, and yeah, it gets a bit grindy, but not unmanageable. Blizzard has become a master of FOMO mechanics, and Overwatch 2 is no exception. Most of this applies to the shop offers, like the Now or Never deals, where they charge $40 for a skin or something similar. If you're a collector, this isn't the game for you. I was also amused to find that PvE missions from the original game aren't available year-round. I'm not talking about the Halloween or New Year events. There are other missions that only appear for a couple of weeks a year. Being able to play them anytime wouldn't have hurt anyone, but no, you have to wait until they're active for a limited period and then gone again. As for longevity, the added maps certainly help keep the content fresh to an extent. Developers release one new hero per season, and that's pretty much it. So, other than small meta shakeups from time to time, nothing major is likely to happen in the foreseeable future. The game feels like it's in maintenance mode. Bare minimum effort is being put in, and anything that requires more resources seems unlikely to get tackled. I wouldn't expect new maps or heroes anytime soon. Just look at the personal hero challenges. Half of them aren't even available yet, and they're just simple objectives like killing enemies or collecting stuff. This isn't rocket science, but it could take years for everything to be released, if it ever happens. This also leads to my thoughts on the future of the game. On one hand, I don't believe there's a bright future full of development. Overwatch 2 is basically a rip-off of the first game with no significant additions and without delivering the promised content that justified the switch to a sequel. Over the past few years, there hasn't been anything that really stands out, and gradually, new heroes shooters will chip away at the player base until the project is closed down. It won't happen immediately, but games like Deadlock, which is in testing as I make this video, could attract a lot of people and speed up the process. Let's talk about cheaters and bots. Obviously they exist, but in casual mode, there's no real incentive for cheaters. I was ready to give the game a high score for this, until I joined a deathmatch. What you see here is me and Lucio being the only real players, while the rest were Torbjorn bots, jumping off cliffs and shooting straight up. They all had Chinese names and were obviously bots. What was the point? There are no loot boxes, and leveling progression is minimal, so I have no idea why they were doing it. Curious if I was just unlucky, I googled it and found that this issue has been around since December 2022. That means Blizzard hasn't solved a trivial bot problem in 2 years, which doesn't inspire much confidence in their handling of more subtle cheating. Finally, on the technical side, there's not much to say. No bugs, no crashes, no stuttering. Overwatch ran fine on my old laptop, which was outdated for modern games, and Overwatch 2 runs smoothly at 50-60 FPS on my newer laptop. So, nothing to complain about here. Chef's kiss. This is where I try to find something positive. Overwatch 2 is still a good game with all its flaws, and I want to play it from time to time. But the problem is that this is not a new game. It's the same game repackaged as free-to-play, because Blizzard couldn't milk the original monetization model enough. Overwatch 2 feels like a case of corporate greed. I know companies need to make money, and that's fine, but this is just too obvious. The game hasn't improved. It's either the same or worse. There's no justification for why it exists, and even though I loved the first Overwatch, I just can't support this behavior with the sequel. That adds up to a total score of 64 out of 100, unless I've messed up the math. But you can check on the screen now. Not great, not terrible, and if they hadn't screwed up so many promises, the score would have been much higher. Also, since I changed the grading system, I re-evaluated Dota 2 and New World. Dota 2 dropped a point from 75 to 74, but the overall experience is still noob-friendly to an extent. Easy to jump into, but hard to master. New World went up to 62, and while I still don't believe the game has a future, I might have been too harsh initially. So there you have it. Overwatch 2 has its score, and I'm out. Remember, the community can vote for which game to review next, so leave your suggestions in the comments. This was the Bullberry Show. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Hopefully, I won't miss another month, but real life is real life, and you never know. Cheers!